Okay, then welcome everybody to the IoT working group session of RIPE 87. Welcome to Rome. It's a pity that with this beautiful weather outside, we are sitting in the basement. Nevertheless, we try to make this an hopefully interesting working group session. I think we have some really interesting presentations, hopefully good discussions, and yeah, let's kick it off. So, quick overview about what we're going to do today. As usual, we have our introduction housekeeping part. Yeah, then we have Anna Maria Mandalari from the University College of London. Welcome back. Yeah, she was presenting here many years ago already. Then something from Eric van Uden from AVM about the Meta IoT protocol. And then Krista Weinigel from NetNod, also something I think very interesting about Roughtime, how to handle secure time for IoT devices. So first things first, housekeeping. So we just have two topics here. First one is the RIPE 86 minutes validation and the code of conduct. So the RIPE 86 meeting minutes have been published already and approved by the working group chairs. You can see the link to the minutes in the bottom of the screen. So everybody who wants to revisit them, have a look, please feel free. Okay, now the important part, participation. I mean, I think most of you are already familiar with the process. If you have a question after one of the sessions, please go to the mic asking your question. Please say your name and your affiliation if you're talking for yourself or if you're speaking as a representative of an organization or a company. Please let us know that. For those who are participating remotely, you can also ask a question using audio video. That is possible using Meet Echo, or you can use the Q&A window to type in your question. We will then read the questions to the audience and to the presenters and ask for the reply accordingly. Also, stenography is available on Meet Echo, and you can also chat with the group and send one-to-one messages. All right, so any questions about that? I don't think so. So let's have a nice meeting, and then I hand over to Anna Maria. Thank you so much. Yes, of course. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. Okay, there are 22 billion Internet of Things devices currently in use. Some devices listen to us, some watches us. Others know what we watch. And there is no such tool nowadays that we can use for giving back the control of security and privacy of devices that we have at home to the users. And there is a sort of user frustration because privacy and security on Internet of Things devices is very difficult to control, and it's very hard to protect users from these threats. Nowadays, fortunately, or I will say in the end of this talk, unfortunately, you can buy some security solutions for Internet of Things devices that we call IoT safeguards. So these devices are like external boxes that you can install in your home, and they claim to protect you from security and privacy threats of the Internet of Things. So this is just an example of the devices that you can buy. Why we are interested in this? So these devices claim to give control back to the user. They do device detection in an automated way. They do intelligent profiling. They do vulnerability assessment, brute force protection, anomaly detection. They protect your privacy by doing content filtering, network intrusion prevention systems. If only this was true. So these safeguards may currently be very ineffective for protecting your home. And not even that, their cloud interaction and data collection operations may introduce privacy risk. So we did this study that was published in the Security and Privacy Conference last year, and our main goals were threefold. So basically, the first goal of this research was what are the privacy and security implications of the usage of IoT safeguards? Do the safeguards really detect threats? And what are the side effects of the safeguards? It's very challenging to measuring them because they are closed systems, so you need a black boxing approach. And at the moment, it's very difficult to find IoT testbed. There is a lack of automation tools and a lack of standard testbeds. So our contribution is a testbed with emulation and probe scripting tools for testing IoT safeguards in a real-world setting. Usually safeguards are like you can buy basically 4 types of safeguards. Safeguards that are embedded directly as an add-on software in your router. So it's like McAfee, Trend Micro, Avira that is partnering with router providers like Dell or Asus, for example. External box that you install and connect to your router, and then you connect all the IoT devices to the external box. This one are Defender, for example, Firewall or F-Secure. Bridge safeguards that are between your inter-service provider and your router, or Finbox, that is another kind of safeguard that use R spoofing for checking all the traffic in your home. And for measuring them, we build an IoT testbed that is located at UCL. And we have hundreds of Internet of Things devices, from smart speakers to cameras, air fryers, anything that you can really buy on Amazon. And we use like a simple NAC as an IoT bridge between the IoT devices and the safeguards. So we are able to collect all the traffic from the IoT devices. And we also have a gateway between the safeguards and the internet. So we are able to collect all the traffic that these safeguards are exchanging over the internet. For the first goal, which are the privacy and security implications of how a safeguard works, we want to understand if these devices are actually working locally or using the cloud for operating. And also if they use third-party services to operate. So we collect all the safeguards, network traffic, we check the second-level domains contacted, and then we check the organization. If the organization is related to the manufacturer, then we classify it as a first party. If it's related to content delivery network or support party services, still first party. Anything else is non-first party. We also collect all the traffic from the IoT traffic, so from the IoT devices, and then we check if this traffic was correlated with the traffic sent to certain destination, contacted to certain destination from the safeguards. And we discovered that the majority of the safeguards, yes, use the cloud for operating, and also some third-party services, like for example, Avira was contacting mixpanel.com, it's a tracking service. Finbox is using Snapcraft of MLab, McAfee using like app measurements, and even some services from Avira that is weird, by the way. And all of them send basically metadata or data about your home in their cloud. And this implies like additional privacy implications. So who is like violating your privacy? In this case, it's not only the IoT devices that you have at home, but also the safeguards that should basically protect you. Considering the IoT devices identification, this amazing tool that they have and they claim to basically automatically identify all the devices that you have at home, for the majority of the case, it doesn't work. Oh, it's not accurate. So as you can see, for example, Avira wasn't even able to identify one of the hundreds of IoT devices we have in the lab. Finbox is the best in this case, so it's working quite okay, but still it was misunderstanding or misidentifying some devices. And this is also can represent a privacy threat because, for example, some of the functionality that these devices, these safeguards are implementing are based on identifying the IoT devices. For example, Finbox claim to mute all the smart speakers that you have at home. So basically disconnect them from the internet. But if it is not able to identify properly it, then it means that it's not muting anything, right, that it should. The other research question that we had was like, are these devices detecting the threats that they claim to detect in their web page? So what we did, we craft some security threats, like for example, anomalous behavior, open port, weak passwords, DOS attacks, contacting malicious destinations, but also some privacy threats like PII exposure, unencrypted traffic, see if they are able to implement DNS over HTTPS. And for doing this, we have a methodology in which we simulate the threat. We wait 20 minutes to allow the threat to be detected. We check automatically in the Safeguards app if the user got notified. If we repeat the process basically 30 times. If the threat was detected at least once, we say that the Safeguards is able to detect that threat. And this is the situation. So basically, we observe that the number of undetected threats tend to be larger than the number of detected threats. Only 3 safeguards out of, so only 3 out of 14 threats are detected by the safeguards, and 3 out of 8 safeguards do not detect any threats at all. And sometimes, even if they detect threats, it takes a long time, like between 45 seconds and sometimes 3 minutes. And we test this different in a period of 1 year, in different periods, and we got the same results. So the situation is not improving. But we didn't stop there. We want to also understand what are the side effects of having these safeguards at home. So we study traffic overheads. If they overprotect us, I really doubt it, since they don't even protect us. So imagine overprotecting. The privacy implications. And for overprotecting, basically, we just leave the taskbed without any threats, and then check if we didn't simulate any threats for a period of like 1 month, and then check if we get notified in the app. We also check network traffic overhead and privacy policies. We discovered that they don't overprotect. Only once we got like a notification from Bitdefender in which malicious destinations were contacted, but then we manually checked and that destination was actually legit. So this happened only once in a period of 1 month. Some of the safeguards introduce some overhead, particularly the ones that are using hard spoofing for detecting the traffic in your home. And in general, the overhead is no less than 10% of the traffic of the IoT devices. So yes, there is an overhead. And we also study manually the privacy policies, and we had numerous concerns, like sometimes they retain your data forever, like in the case of Farwala. And then they say vague sentences like, okay, we take your data in accordance with legal requirements, of they state that they work with third-party partners, and sometimes they send your traffic over the internet, not even anonymized, and et cetera, et cetera. So you can see the results in this table. So we discovered that we need to strengthen the IoT ecosystem. And for doing this, we need to implement trust between the endpoints that we're installing in our home, like in our smart hospital or in our smart city. But in the same case, we need interconnectivity, and also we need tools for making users aware of what are the risks, the privacy and security risk of having an IoT devices. One of the solutions that we came out at UCL is doing everything at the edge. So use AI for detecting threats, but not using the clouds, like trying to have all the processing in the smart router. So we basically need to use the local traffic for improving the situations. Another study that we are working on is, so another tool that can help to protect the users from privacy and security threats of IoT devices is regulations. So we're working on a framework that is called COPSEC. So you know that in Europe, you have some cybersecurity guidelines from ENISA. In the US, you have NIST. You have also some in the Emirates. And you also have some privacy regulations like GDPR. But there is a lack of understanding whether IoT devices actually comply with these guidelines and privacy policies. And at the moment, there is no enforcement, right? Because it's very hard. It's implementing all the black box approaches at scale. So we propose a methodology for converting security guidelines in something that you can measure, something that you can measure live in the home router. So we select the security guidelines and privacy regulations. We turn them into metrics. Obviously, you cannot do all the security guidelines. Some of them are not you cannot really convert all of them in metrics, but the majority of them, yes, you can. Then we define some experiments to test and extract the metrics from the IoT devices. And in the end, we produce a certification, a label for the tested device. We tested just few guidelines in this first paper in this first poster that we published in Mobicom this year. And one is the number of unused ports, so the number of open ports that are not used. And as you can see, most of the devices are not compliant with these guidelines. And also the number of protocols that are not recognized. So we have many devices that use a protocol that is not standard. And we also have some privacy violation, like, for example, one of our devices was violating GDPR because we're sending personal identifiable information like your MAC address completely unencrypted over the internet. During our study for converting security guidelines in something that you can measure, we discovered that seeing that there were so many devices that were not using standard protocols to secure their communication, we had a look at the local traffic. And we discovered that some devices were using always the same local traffic for communicating with the smartphone hub for triggering an activity. So what we developed is like a methodology for understanding, for doing replay attacks on IoT devices, and also methodology that use AI, machine learning, for identify that the attack was successful. So what we do, we basically check the local communication. If there is no local communication, it means that the guidelines the security guidelines is already violated, because one of the security guidelines of the NISA say that the devices should be able to talk locally. So if there is local communication, we collect the traffic of the local communication. We then train machine learning models for learning the responses, and we replay the traffic. Replaying the traffic, we then check that the functionality in the app was actually triggered or not. And later we use the machine learning model that we train on for not even checking directly the app, but just looking at the local traffic. We discovered that the majority, so we studied like 31 devices. We discovered that more than half of the IoT devices we had in the lab are, the replay attacks were working on them. We also test two scenarios, the one in which we switch off the device and then we replay the attacks. And it's always working except for TP-Link smart plug, in which we discovered that when you are restarting the devices, then the identifier is reset and whatever, and the replay attacks doesn't work anymore. We also disclose our findings with the manufacturers. None of them replay except TP-Link, that after 24 hours told us that they did a firmware upgrade, and now the vulnerability is not there anymore. So we tested it. We didn't actually test it because it was 2 days ago, but we will test it as soon as I go back to London. So UCL, we're working on this IoTrim app that is basically working on the smart router and can detect easily vulnerabilities, security vulnerabilities, privacy threats, doing IoT devices identification. And what we want to do is like releasing this open source so that any user, how they're using IoT devices, can finally be protected and be protected for real. So in conclusion, we quantify, we basically measure, we did an approach for measuring IoT safeguards and analyzing the data practice. We developed a scalable methodology for evaluating the effectiveness of detection threats for IoT safeguards. And all our software and data is open source. We also responsible disclosure our results with the safeguards. And the funny thing is that now we are working together with Think for doing a research on optimizing energy consumption for IoT devices. We are also working with Bitdefender, with which we basically submit a European proposal together for IoT certification. So the good effects of this study was that a safeguards manufacturer now knows their vulnerabilities and they're taking actions for this. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions.
So for questions, we have microphones here. We can also have a look into the internet. So we have the first question here in the room.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation, Anna. Jad Al-Sham, RIPE NCC. I have actually two questions.
Yep.
If you go back to slide 11, where you said you showed like which of the safeguards send traffic to the clouds, I was wondering if you were able to give more insights on what kind of traffic was being shared, because, okay, I'm going to say something controversial. It's not necessarily a bad thing that every time we use the cloud, sometimes it could be for good reasons. And my second question, how does this play with MUD and all of that?
How
does these safeguards work with the MUD, manufacturer usage descriptor?
I will reply to your second question. So no one use manufacturer user description. Okay. No, there is no one IoT devices that we have in the lab that is using manufacturer user description. And when I talk to them responsible for Bitdefender box about manufacturer user description, they didn't know that this such standard exists.
Okay.
And yeah, for replying to your first question, sorry. So we cannot see the traffic because we use a black boxing approach. So all the traffic that we see and we capture is encrypted, and we not try to do man in the middle because we want to leave the black boxing approach as something that we can use in the future when we don't have man in the middle capabilities in the home router. But we just correlate the traffic that is sent from the IoT devices to the traffic that is sent from the safeguards, so the quantity of bytes. For when we trigger a specific action from the IoT devices to the traffic that is sent from the safeguards at the same time of seconds later to a specific destinations, dispersed party destinations. And we saw that the correlation is, so the traffic, the number of bytes is very similar. So the trans respect basically the trans of the action of the IoT devices. It means that all the traffic is forwarded to their cloud. I mean, this is our assumption. Some devices, some safeguards, yes. Half of them, they send everything. So some, they send metadata. This was also confirmed by them when we did the responsible disclosure. So they admitted that they were sending metadata, and we also checked this in the privacy policy, and it was written. You're welcome.
Okay, Anna, first of all, thank you so much. I was thinking it's bad, but it's worse.
Yes.
And I have one question. So Peter Steinhauser's embed GmbH speaking for myself. One question that's bothering me a little bit. If you look at those safeguard devices and software solutions, given the, at least the feeling I have, the inefficiency of the solutions and the privacy implications. So what's a trade-off? So from your research, would you say better don't use them?
I mean, do you want a personal
yes, for
or
sure.
a scientific?
Well, I'm happy with both sides of it.
So I think that something is better than nothing.
Okay.
But still, we are far away for having like full protection in our home. And I think that the solution, as I said in my presentation, will be working at the edge. So trying to avoid the cloud at all costs.
Yeah. Okay. And another question before I give the mic to Michael. So what do you think, for instance, the IoT working group in RIPE, how can we participate, support? Any ideas from your side?
Yeah, so there is a big problem nowadays in research for IoT, that is data.
Okay.
So it's very complicated. So all the test beds and all the study that we did is because we had the resources for doing our own experiments, right? So we got some money, we built the test beds, etc. So my idea is to have a sort of federated IoT test beds in which everyone, researcher, people from industry, can use the lab for experiments with IoT devices and basically have an open databases on security vulnerabilities and privacy threats that are found everywhere in the world in that moment. So yeah, data observatory for privacy and security threats of IoT and federated IoT testbeds.
Wow. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you.
Michael Richardson. So you said just now, I was going to ask you the question similarly, but you said something is better than nothing. But from what I saw in your slides, it looked like most of the safeguard devices were offering nothing to offering to disclose my private information to their cloud service in perpetuity. So it actually sounds to me like nothing is better than whatever you're doing. And that installing this safeguard sounds to me to be unsafe.
Well, yeah, some of them definitely are because they are not offering any service. And not only that, we are also paying for that services. So these devices come with expensive subscriptions.
Isn't that fraud? I mean, no, I'm serious. Isn't that fraud to be selling me a service they're not providing and then violating
I don't know
privacy? It sounds like a regulatory thing. And the UK has some new things coming that are supposed to have labeling of some of the devices. So it sounds to me like these devices should be labeled as hostile devices, not protective ones.
Yeah, like them, any other IoT devices that you can buy in Amazon, really. Like look at the replay attacks vulnerabilities that we found. So this is why we need really this labeling scheme and certification schemes. A tool that will be able to do live monitoring on the devices in people's homes. So something that can work, for example, in the IoT gateways. And in my opinion, this will be the only solution to stop this, right?
So the related question is maybe in your lab, how much exercise do the devices get? Like, is there someone walking into the lab and ordering toilet paper through a smart speaker regularly, or turning the lights on and off, or running the kettle?
Like how many activities we replicate?
Yeah. Do you have to like script those? Do you have to like
Yeah. So it's everything automated. It means that every time we want to do some experiments, we just click, we just basically run a script, automated script that
on
is
the phone, on a smartphone to tell it to do something.
So the phones are connected to the server.
Yeah.
Where the device is, so the server is like an access point.
All right.
That gives connectivity to the devices and give connectivity also to the phones. The devices can be controlled through the phone, so we use ADB shell for clicking in the screen of the phone and controlling the devices. And basically, we can repeat this how many times we wish.
So you don't have to have some
physically
people student wander in and order do things.
No, for example, with the smart speakers, what we do, we connect not smart speaker, normal speaker, to the server next to the speaker.
Yeah.
And then we use Google Translate for triggering the sentence. What is the capital of Italy? Alexa, what is the capital of Italy? And Alexa trigger. So everything is really automated. This is the strong part about our IoT task, but this is why I want to federate it.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter Koch-Dienig. Also on the potential next steps, did you have, and maybe I missed that part, but did you have like a chance to do some outreach, talk to consumer protection or to other institutions about this? And second question, and I'm not sure, maybe I missed that part, but is your lab environment, would that be able to like intercept or interfere with the traffic to research the effectiveness of such measures?
Yeah, thank you for your questions. Yeah, so indeed, we talk with many consumer protection organizations. Like one is Consumer Reports in US. You can go online, you will find many blogs that they wrote based on our study in our IT taskbed. Ofcom in UK, I'm going to talk to them in January. So they're very interested, and the reaction that I always get when I do a talk related to these things is like, surprise, like, I don't know, everybody looks like so surprised. So there is no really awareness about these threats from these devices. And this is what we need to create and talk to regulators. What I think is that, unfortunately, regulations are done by only lawyers most of the time, right? And this is worrying because the future of what needs to be regulated need like technical experts. And this is what I'm trying to do also here in Italy, where I'm also part of the technical committee for strategic AI and talking with these consumers organizations.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe if I may follow up and then get a chance to respond maybe to the second question. But obviously, at least in the EU, there's a certain legislation around that is maybe comes from the radio equipment, like the Radio Equipment Directive and other things. So this whole toolbox that is in there that usually contains a part that is called market surveillance. And I was wondering whether those institutions would be interested in your findings.
I think so. I didn't talk to them. I didn't have the.
That might be a leader into that because they have the.
We constantly talk with the data protection authorities. So I talk with the Information Commission Officer, the Italian Data Protection Authority, and but they don't have really the resources for opening cases at the moment.
They may not, but the market surveillance is a strong tool there. They are after like these dangerous baby dolls that call back home and do stuff, but they might.
Yeah, would be interesting. Sure, definitely. Thank you.
David Schweitzer, work for NetDev, but I'm speaking for myself. So have you had any exchange with open source projects, like, for example, ad blocking platforms like Pi-hole, to maybe discuss what their technologies they're using to intercept or to block the traffic of these devices?
So we did a paper few years ago, 2 years ago, that we call IoTrim, that is blocking non-essential destinations for IoT devices. And what we discovered, so we did an automated methodology for understanding what are the destinations that are essential for the device to work and what are the destinations that are not required for the device to work. We did all this in our taskbeds with us 40 devices, and 61 of the destinations contacted by these 40 devices were non-essentials. We then take these destinations and compare with the blocking lists that you have in Pi-hole. They usually are EasyList, Motherboard, and other lists that are basically mostly used for web browsing. And we saw that the majority of the destinations that we saw from the Internet of Things devices that were non-essentials weren't there, because it's a completely different backend infrastructure, different ecosystem, so destinations are really different. So we did this study. But
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great questions. I think Anna Maria's around, and she
will
would love to follow up, I'm quite sure. Then, thanks. Now, Eric will tell us a little bit about Matter IoT.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you are thinking, now I have a deep dive into Matter, I have to disappoint you. That's not the goal of my presentation. However, we had a long discussion with Peter about what's happening in the world and why does it matter that we talk about matter in this audience. Because matter is, I see it as a bridge into the internet world, and there's a lot of protocols where within the RIPE is a lot of talking of, and that's why we said let's give a short introduction and some discussions what we should do there and why make it sense to have a deeper sight on it. Just for this few who doesn't recognize who is AVM, we are the manufacturer of the Fritzbox. This small CPEs you find mainly here in Europe for all technologies, and that's our main business. But anyway, besides the connectivity we have in our products, we see there is more hooked on in several devices, hooked on in Wi-Fi devices, hooked on from the part of smart home devices. That's why we said, okay, we have to do something. We have to go in a broader environment. So not only the connectivity, not only the Fritzbox, but also the in-home world in this case. So what I'm doing in the houses. The interesting part is that because a lot of people ask me, why are you doing smart home using DECT ULE? Okay, there's a very simple reason for that. All the Fritzboxes, or most Fritzboxes we produce, have DECT on board, and we use the DECT technology for just telephone systems. And then the chip vendor from, in this case, talked to us. Are you aware that with those chips you also can use smart home? And we're talking years ago. Smart what? Smart home. And also already stated we are producing routers. We're not coming from the smart home world. But with this, okay, we said we built this very simple power plug. And this power plug was really successful. If you look to the figures to the KFK, sorry, the German Institute for Marketing Research, we were successful. The reason for that is because we have so a number of Fritzboxes in the field, and this makes it very simple that you can connect your devices to the internet and switch it on, switch it off. So simple as it is, so simple as I described it. And for this, as already said, DECT ULE was at that time, in fact, the perfect protocol, because in this case we're not forced to introduce a second radio into the products. At this time, we had several options. Anyway, I will come later on to that. DECT ULE is a very simple protocol, but one of the big benefits, it operates in a regulated environment, a regulated frequency band. So if you instead even compare with the 2.4 gigahertz band, it's an ISM band. Everyone can do and play in those bands what he likes to do. This is not the real solution, we think. And if you look to the one of the benefits, this is also the power consumption. And be in mind, we are years ago, so it is not something from the last years. It's a long time ago. So power consumption is really important for devices, battery-operated devices. And of course, for the power plug, it's not so relevant. But if you look to a radiator knob, that's really relevant because it only has battery operation. So you need something with less power consumption, and it's really easy to connect, and it's a stable connection. This is something what we used, and we thought, okay, this is the right approach, this is the right direction. As already said, we already had the chip in the router. So it was easy to use the chip for the same functionalities, in this case for telephony, but as well for smart home. That's the whole reason why we introduced the DECT connectivity, the DECT ULE standards for smart home connectivity. With this, we created our own world, and this is important because this is the Fritz world. And all the devices you see in this slide are Fritz devices, and goes from lamps to radiator to knobs, several versions, goes to door sensors, and so on and so on. But all those devices are AVM devices, or in this case, Fritz devices. Looks interesting, looks nice. That's a relatively small world. So it's very hard. And if you look to the world of smart home, it's much wider than just those elements, because in fact, everything on the slide where you see, that's it. That's the only thing we have from AVM. Very easy, very simple, but you want to have more. What you like to do is open yourself for third-party manufacturers. So for this, we make a next step, and we built 2 new products. And the next steps are products with a Zigbee interface. So this means we have a gateway available with Zigbee, as well a new upcoming router somewhere early next year with Zigbee included. So we already said in the beginning we only had DECT, but now we're also entering the world of the Zigbee. And with this, we can connect more devices to the Fritz world, but it's only one direction. We need also something that you have the smart home world can connect to the Fritz world. So, ta-da, there it is. We think as within AVM, this is the solution to open ourselves, so that that we are open from the meta world and we can connect from the meta world. The meta world can control, is better words, the meta world can control the Fritz world. To switch on, to switch off, to do all the things, and not on the proprietary solutions as you find in the past. Be more open, be more flexible. And the meta protocol have all the cards for those solutions. What is meta? It's new. The protocol was finally finalized last year, so it looks promising. There are big companies behind, companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, IKEA, Samsung, and so on and so on. It is simple and it's necessary. It's open, it's royalty free, and this makes it a very interesting protocol for entering the world and for have ability to connect controllers to the Fritz world. There's only the fact when we step into this market segment. It should be very easy. That says meta devices should work with other meta devices. It's based on security protocols. It's very energy efficient. And meta is designed to have this also the interoperability to existing devices. And I show you later on how this is done. And maybe I'm a little bit too positive, but Meta is expected as the standard for smart home connectivity within homes. But this is a little bit under discussion, let's say it nicely, but I think it still has the best cards for that. How does it work? And that's why we've said, in this case, I have to say we is in this case Peter and I. You see a lot of protocols running up. And we know all those protocols have more or less also working groups within the RIPE community. So protocols like IP version 6 protocols, as well as we stated with TCP and of course UDP. There's a lot of talking about this. So from my point of view, you have to think about it. What's happening and what is the influence of within my routers? What's the influence of the traffic? And we will just have the presentation of before we see what IoT devices might and can do within your environment. And now we make it even bigger, even more devices, and a lot of devices we connect to this world. The interesting part, if you look to the layer 1, the layer 1 is based on Wi-Fi, on thread, and thread is in fact, and I hope you don't shoot me, but I see thread as a Zigbee protocol with TCP. So I forget the layers with from the Zigbee environment. It's just the underlayers are the same, and on top you have the standard IP layers. As well, Bluetooth Low Energy. This will be used for the first setup, and as already said, the standard Wi-Fi protocol. So it is really integrated in your router and your standard protocols, and that's why we said, we have to do something with it. And just thinking. What we did as from AVM is said, okay, let's first of all, let's introduce the gateway. And the gateway is only to from the Fritz world to the Zigbee world in this case to make connectivity. The gateway is as well our let's say our entrance into the Matter world. But this will be the bridge. This will be the Matter bridge so that we can connect from a Matter controller to a Fritz world. As we already said, we need both directions. I need to connect from my Fritz world to a Zigbee world as well. I need a standard interface where I can control all my DECT ULE devices from a Matter world. That's the only approach we think is relevant, and the only thing what we think is the right solution. The interesting part of this is that the Matter stack finalized in the end of 22. So we are still, as far as I see it, in an experimental state. We show this Matter solution, the first approach, on the IFA, is an fair in Germany, in Berlin. It looks promising, but as I said, we were not there as an industry, and also in the protocol. And I learned something, and on the plenary presentation about secure timing and so on. It's not there, not finalized in the whole Matter protocol. It's still open, so there's still work to do within the whole Matter protocol. This means as we, as a manufacturer, still have work to do. We're not there at the end. To make it very clear, to make it very simple, this is the only thing what we do. This is the approach what we see, and this is the approach what we think is will the first step. So you can control everything from your well-known applications. As an example, Google Home, you can control now direct and without connectivity to the internet. You can control your Fritz world, because this is also an interesting part. Matter can work without an internet connection. In the past, you had a lot of solutions. They only work if there is you are cloud-based. So the only thing that you can control, you switch on, switch off your lights if you have an internet connection. When your internet connection is broken, and there are a lot of solutions on this world, you can't control your smart home world anymore. And with Matter, there is no need to have an internet connection. You can do it from your local network. And we think this is the better approach. It's exactly the same as we always did within the Fritz world. So even without an internet connection, you could control, you could manage your smart home. That's the way it should work, and that's the way it should, yeah, from my point of view, I can't sell it to my wife if it doesn't work that way. I took a little sidestep. Why I'm involved in the broadband forum. And there are the latest discussion we had a few weeks ago. There was deeply discussion about the protocol 30369, or well known as USP. And from my point of view, from my vision, we have to do on both sides something, because USP is a protocol where we can monitor and control a lot of elements within the smart, in your home, not only the smart home, but including from Wi-Fi, but as well from smart home. So this way, there is a lot of discussions between the Broadband Forum and the CSA, and maybe you know the CSA as the Zigbee Alliance. That's exactly the same company, but now called the CSA. About, okay, what's happening, what we're doing there, what do we need in the data model of TR369? And already myself popped up, okay, what about privacy? Do I want to know that a customer switch on, switch off his lights on the operator side? So this is something we have to talk about this. We have to think about this, because yeah, we already learned privacy is relevant and we can't ignore it. So yes, you need something to do to make it easy, to make it more interoperable, to make it more, how do you say it, convenient for your end customers, but don't forget privacy. So there are a lot of talkings. They're absolutely not finalized yet. They just started. And this is something what I think it will be continue, and I don't see on a really short notice here a solution or a direction. But anyway, we're there, it's happening, and wait and see how this will continue. With this, I show you, in fact, what we can do. This is the whole world where we can connect. This is all what we can do from the Fritz world. And what matter, we make it more expandable, extendable, let's say the better word. And with USB, you can control everything, including smart home devices. That's what my statement here. And this might be interesting to follow up. As already said, if you like a deep dive, please visit those links. There you find a lot of information about all the protocols, as well as the AVN. Feel free to send me an email. I probably will forward to development. But anyway, it's worth. And also what we had with Peter, let's do it also on the mailing list, because I think this will be relevant for the RIPE group to realize what's happening in this world and to realize what we're doing over there. So I hope I give you a little bit of impression what's happening over there. It's, as already said, it's just a quick and short and brief overview, but it's just, for me, is the wake-up call. Be aware of what we're doing there. Thank you for that.
So we are now open for questions, especially also the 19 people on the internet. So take also the chance before you do a deep dive on your question. You may just fire your question now and get the answer straight ahead. So, microphone.
Hello there. I'm an employee of British Telecom. I should point that out. My name's Tom, but I'm also personally a user of Fritzbox at home, and I quite enjoy your stuff. So I say this with a lot of love. But I think you may have missed some of the standards work going on in this area. The SNAC working group in the IETF in particular, and it fans out into a couple of the other working groups. I think there's fundamental definitions that are being made there that will inform the Broadband Forum and the CSA in a fashion, and certainly would inform the work that you're doing with the CPE. In particular, one of the things that, well, two things in particular. One, Matter should be IPv6 only, which is great. We love this. But also, stub networks in particular shouldn't be transit networks. So I was looking at your diagram there with the different, the interactions between them, and I was thinking, okay, does that fall under that definition? I wasn't sure. I'd love to have a chat with you at some point about V6 only transition stuff, but it's out of the context of this. But yeah, please do include and get involved in the SNAP working group, because I think it would really benefit from your input.
Yeah, thanks for that. For my preparation for myself and also with my internal colleagues, I really focus on the CSA work. That's correct. So I had a look what's happening within the IoT. I had some chats with Peter. So what's done here, and absolutely correct. I didn't look into the IETF what's done in this case. So you're absolutely right. Thanks.
Michael Richardson here. We should actually do follow-up. We should actually have a presentation next time on SNAC. That's actually a good idea into this working group. Whether it's me or him or Ted or whatever, we can figure something out. But what I was excited to see was this your TR369 interaction, and in the 1B COP we did whatever number of years that was ago. That's actually like what we wanted to be able to do. We wanted to be able to say, hey, there's this protocol, you should use it. That's the best current practice. And then we discovered there's isn't one. So that sounds like you're actually finally doing that. And I think that's really exciting, and I'd love to hear more as it goes forward into here. I think the Broadband Forum work is mostly open. The CSA Matter stuff is not. And you said it was royalty free, and I don't think that's quite true.
That's what I find on their own website.
Yeah, so it's royalty free to download the spec, but in order to go through the compliance mechanism, you must be a member. And they have a bunch of stuff in there, some of it involving blockchain, that basically compels you to remain a member forever. So no, just not like the IEEE where you get your OUI and then you stop paying. No, you're going to have to keep remaining a member. So that's a little bit, I think it's difficult for many manufacturers that are not Google scale to do that. And maybe you'll find, you know, where it is. But I'm still really excited about the merge, about that overlap, and yeah, come tell us more.
Based on I heard two elements. First of all, on the USB stack, what we learned also within our Plugfest, that from the CP environment, we're a little bit surprised because we introduced USB, and I have to look to my colleague 1.5 year, 2 years ago, so more or less, as one of the early adapters within the USB environment. And we had some vendors, and we had some chats with them as well, and also on the front. I said, you're quite far ahead, and it surprised us because we think, and I absolutely agree with you, that USB is something very important because we get rid of the old-fashioned TR69 and we move into a little bit more the modern world with a little bit more possibilities. But it surprised me. This is the first step, and of course we're not ready yet completely. Don't misunderstand me. We have still a lot of work to do within the USB stack, but we're quite
well. There's a fair bit, from what I understand. There's a fair bit of I want to say disagreement, market opportunities for different encodings, different transports, and whether this is your CPE talking to your ISP, just TR69's real thing, or to what extent your mobile phone now gets to talk to your CPE and therefore control the DECT devices, right? And that's the part that I think is exciting, and I think is probably much less mature, because the other guys are looking at ISP interoperations and they just hate SOAP, right? I mean, TR69 was all SOAP and everyone hates that. So yeah, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. And yeah, and the second question is that of your remark are based on the program. Yeah, I have to be very careful. But let's say this way: if you look to the Wi-Fi standards, you have the IEEE with all the Wi-Fi, you have the Wi-Fi alliances. We as AVM, we listen to the IEEE for the Wi-Fi implementation. Maybe this answers your question with the.
Yeah, thank you, Peter Gordinik. First of all, congratulations to Michael for mentioning blockchain. Well, without a reason, but then. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing this. I think it's important to connect these worlds, and I think with these pointers in the direction of the IETF, one mission of the working group is already accomplished, like connecting these things, pun intended. On the other side, so I don't know anything about Matter. I would like to learn more and maybe go into some details. And then Peter mentioned doing something until the next meeting. May I make a suggestion that if you have the time and there's interest in the group, that you may be able to, because other working groups have been successful with having an interim session of an hour or so on Zoom or something, that you, if you're willing and have the time, that you explain in a bit more like technical detail, where in this whole protocol stack Matter is having the roles. That might be interesting and might also inform the discussion in the connection with what happens in the IETF and what happens on.
I love to, but I need some preparation for that, but I love to. And because this is exactly the thing was said, okay, what can you have in one slot here? So, but I need a little bit more. Also, we had this to go in more technical details, and I love to do it. But I need some preparation, and I can offer this. Peter, my offering is there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yo, thanks for the top on that. That's exactly what we are looking to. I started quite new, and the group was quite quiet in the time between the meetings, and maybe that is a chance to bring in a little bit more blood into the discussion, especially if you just compare the topics. So there's quality standards on security, there's a new standard coming up, and so combining that things and learn from each other would be a very great thing. And we are maintaining the mailing group as well, so whenever somebody feels that there can be something for the topic, so just use the mailing group to make each other aware, and so we are happy to have probably an online session in the middle of this and the next RIPE meeting. So it's up to you to join. So we have 18 people on the internet, so we still had not yet a question out of the net. Peter, how it looks like?
Not yet, but I have a quick comment. Peter Steinhauser, Embed GmbH, speaking for myself. I think it's important that you mentioned the privacy situation about TR 369 because okay, so the specifics about TR 369 are that you can have several controllers. So also the device the home user himself is using or herself is using to control the home network can use this protocol. But from the ISP side, frankly speaking, I don't want the ISP to see what's happening in my home network. And here, I think in the BBF, it's very important to figure out what would be the actual use cases for the ISP, what's the interest of the ISP? Because, I mean, the ISP is supposed to provide networking. That's the job of the ISP, not digging into my private data at home. Yeah.
That's correct, and the direction goes more or less, and it was also here that how you say it. It is the whole the connectivity, the switching world, and maybe the status world, and that's already had in the planner where we are moving more and more in those big data analysis, and this looks very promising. And also from the BBF, there are digging into entering EI on big data analysis to have better connectivity and to learn from the whole environment and so on and so on. And including myself, I have the big question mark. Okay, what about privacy? I do understand the goal and the visions, but what about privacy? That's also from my part. Yeah, I agree.
So the mic back to Mike again.
Michael Richardson. So the ISP mostly has no business in any of it, but they may have a rendezvous role. And the specific case, my mother lives about 100 kilometers from me. It's really inconvenient to go and fix her computer, particularly her, home router, because that's the rest broken, right? And that's a good example of where actually, you're basically dealing more with care for other relatives or other places, and you need to do something. And actually, it is useful to find out if your mother's left the stove on, your 90-year-old mother's left the stove on when she's at your house, right? That turns out to be a valuable thing for things. And well, the ISP has no involvement. They do have a rendezvous because they're the only one that knows where my mother's home is right now, or what IP address it got today, right?
There is one, I see one addition to that. If you look to what's in the Matter protocol, it's talking IP version 6. It's an IP device. And we learned in the previous presentation, okay, is now my cooker a ROG device? Is this jamming and so on and so on? So I think it makes word that we know also in the protocol, because this is one of the abilities in the USP protocol, that we know who is communicating, what's happening over there. When we see from a particular line, this is really, forgive me the word, bullshit coming over, that we can control it. Right. And that's the approach where we think it might be relevant to have a look on it. But all said, look about privacy as well.
Okay, then. Thank you so much, Eric. Thanks a lot. Yeah, now handing over to Christer from NetNod.
So, hello, my name is Christer Weinigel. I work for NetNod in Sweden. And as a bit of background, I work quite a lot with embedded devices, mostly on Linux, not really on tiny devices, IoT devices, or many IoT devices are really concentrated, very small. I haven't worked much on a device like that, but I have a background in sort of working with hardware, so I sort of understand them, but I haven't worked with internet connected small devices. So let's get into it. I'm going to talk about time, and sort of accurate time is important. There are lots of protocols on the internet that depend on accurate time. You have DNSSEC, TLS, and TLS is the basis of a bunch of other protocols. Both DNSSEC and TLS, they need time to within a few minutes, maybe a few hours, because you want to be able to validate a certificate. And what's the risk if you don't have good time? Well, if somebody can trick you into using a really old certificate, it might use old, by now broken encryption algorithms or signing algorithms that it's possible to break them, just brute force them, because MD5 today isn't secure anymore. Another problem might be that you might be tricked into using old information or leaked information. If somebody gets access to a backup tape from your bank, well, they might be able to trick you into believing that, well, they are the bank, if you don't know what time it is. And then you have other examples. The application itself might need time. So at a hotel like this, if they have a door which is supposed to be open at 8 o'clock in the morning, because there are always people there at 8 o'clock in the morning in the reception, well, if you can trick them into opening the door at 6 o'clock in the morning, somebody might get in and steal stuff. So there are other reasons why time might be important. And if you want to start synchronizing industrial processes, well, you might need time to a lot better accuracy than just 10 seconds. You might really want sort of milliseconds or that kind, really sort of good accuracy. So how do you keep time? Well, just about any device can keep time when it's powered on, because you have a timer interrupt, so you can always count, well, if I get 100 ticks per second, well, 100 ticks have passed, a second has passed. But what do you do when your device is powered off? Some IoT devices may not even have a real-time clock. You might need an external chip to add that, and an external chip costs money. So when you're building lots of devices, millions of devices, you might want to cut down on the hardware. There are other devices that do have a real-time clock in the hardware. If you look at the Raspberry Pi, it has an RTC in the CPU. It's just that the Raspberry Pi doesn't come with a battery. If you want a battery, you need to buy a battery cape. Otherwise, every time you power off your Raspberry Pi, it loses time. There's also something called shipping mode, which is basically if you have a device sitting on a shelf for a few years, you don't really want to run the battery flat. So usually there's a small pull tab. So you pull the tab, connect the battery to the device, and the first time it boots up, it has no clue at all what time it is. It might have been sitting on the shelf for a year or for 5 years. You don't know. And related to that, there's also another problem related to sitting 10 years on the shelf. When you start up, does any of the infrastructure you rely on still exist? TLS root CA certificates, they might have expired. The DNSSEC root certificates root keys might have expired. I believe DNSSEC has sort of a solution where you can follow a chain forward in time. I don't know if TLS has the same thing. So, especially for IoT devices that might be sold and then sit on the shelf, there can be issues with the current protocols. So, if you need time then, how do you solve this? Well, since we're talking about IoT, we're talking about the internet, you can usually connect to the internet and talk to a server somewhere. And then we have the good old NTP protocol. NTP has been around since at least 1984. I believe that's when the first sort of specification of NTP arrived. The problem with NTP is that NTP lacks security. There are some attempts at security in NTP, but they don't really scale to internet sizes. They scale to tens of thousands of devices. Key management is a pain, and you can't do this for millions of devices. Another problem in NTP, there was a protocol called AutoKey, and basically it's not safe enough. The people who did it, built that protocol didn't know enough about security to make it really secure. So up here comes NTS, something I worked on worked to make it into a IETF protocol. So NTS adds security. It does that using TLS, and this gives us a bit of a bootstrapping problem, because if TLS relies on time, and you need TLS to get time, where do you start? There are ways to get around it. You can say, well, we'll ignore the time when we do the first check, then we get time, then we go back, look, does this look reasonable? But it is cumbersome, and it adds complexity, and it's not foolproof either. And another problem with NTS is that, well, since it relies on TLS, many IoT devices, small ones, don't have TLS or don't have TLS, which is sort of new enough, has all the features we might need for NTS. So, and if you look at IoT devices, if you have a fight between features and adding security, most manufacturers will go for features because that's what sells the product. The security is just a problem when you have a security failure or you have a break-in. There are also other protocols that could be used. For example, you could just use HTTP because there's a date header in the HTTP. So you can ask the server, well, give me a web page and I'll get the time as part of the response. But then you have the same problem. HTTP doesn't have any encryption, doesn't have any security. If you use TLS, you're dependent on TLS again. Another related problem to time is, what do you do if you have a single point of failure? Because a lot of devices today where you can specify an NTP server, you can only specify one. And if that one breaks, or if that one is compromised, well, then you have an issue because you can no longer trust time from that single server. So how do you get around that? So what I want to present is a possible solution. It's called Roughtime. It's an IETF draft by a bunch of people. I got involved sort of 2-3 years ago, so I don't really know about the beginnings of Roughtime, but as far as I know, it started out as a way to solve the bootstrapping problem. So the goal wasn't to replace NTP. The goal was to give 10-second accuracy so that you can validate a TLS certificate, and then you can start getting time some other secure way. When you have TLS, DNSSEC, all that infrastructure is up and running. It is secure. It has a fairly low CPU usage, fairly low memory footprint. So it's probably suitable for a small resource-constrained IoT device. Some of the concepts in Roughtime is that you use ED25519, which is public key cryptography. You use that to sign the responses from the server. That way, the server has a private key, can sign the responses, and the clients can verify it using the public key. This makes it eases key distribution a bit. It also uses Merkle tree, but I'll get back to that later on. The basic idea in Roughtime is that you have long-term keys that are basically hard-coded into the device. They live forever. This takes away the bootstrapping problem, because if you have those hard-coded keys and the names for those servers in your firmware, well, then you already have them. You don't have the issue where you have to use somebody else or look at root CAs. You have all the information you need. This is a bit of a trade-off, though. It's a bit of a trade-off, because what you do is you replace the bootstrapping problem with a key distribution problem, and key distribution is hard, or it's hard to do well. But the basic idea is you have a bunch of Roughtime servers, probably add sort of the names and keys for 100 servers, put them in your firmware. And what you do when you boot up is that you take your list of 100 servers, you choose 10 of them, ask all 10 of them for time. And if enough of them, if you have a consensus, if a majority of them, let's say 5 of them, all give you the same time, you say, well, this is good enough. I can probably trust this time, because even if one server has gotten compromised, or if one server is broken and just because the clock is bad, it gives out the wrong time, well, if you see 5 servers agreeing on what time it is, you're probably good to go. So this removes the single point of failure, and this is also sort of how you solve the 10-year on the shelf problem, that the bet is that in 10 years, enough of those 100 servers will still be up and running so that we can actually get time from 5 of them. I'm not sure if it's a good bet, but that's sort of the idea behind Roughtime. Another important thing is that Roughtime is intended for devices where you can update this list. So when you've bootstrapped your device the first time, gotten time the first time, have a secure connection, well, you can download a new list. Or worst case, you could say, I want to download a new firmware because you're going to need security updates for your TLS stack anyway. So the idea is, if you can update the firmware, this is sort of good enough because you can update the firmware, you can get a new list. And if the list is a few years old, when you boot up the first time, it doesn't matter, and then you get an updated list. One thing to note here is that Roughtime, the concepts here could be applied to other protocols. So it doesn't have to be Roughtime, but Roughtime is right now a draft. It's out there, so that's what we're building on right now. Roughtime has a few rather neat ideas, I'd say. One of them is that you have a nonce. So you have a unique identifier which you usually fill in with random data. And the idea is that you hand this unique identifier of 32 bytes to the server. The server signs in the reply from the server, you get the UID or nonce back, and it has a cryptographic signature. This means that you know that, well, the response from the server this time is actually a response to my request. And this is to avoid replay attacks that we've heard about before. This is necessary for security, I'd say, so it's basically free. And if you have a 32-bit sort of block of data, well, it doesn't have to be random. For example, if you want to, you could say, well, let's take a document I have. I'll hash the document using a secure algorithm. I get a 32-byte hash. I can actually hand this hash to the server as the nonce or as the unique identifier. The server signs this together with a timestamp, I get it back. And now I actually have a signature from somebody else which says, at this point in time, I had this document, I had access to this document. So if I sign an NDA with a company who says, well, you are not allowed to share information you have received from us, I can actually prove that, well, I had access to this document before I signed the NDA with you, so I'm free to share this information, which could be very useful. Could be other uses for sort of this kind of timestamping. It's called a timestamping authority. There are other protocols for it, but Roughtime could be a very lightweight timestamping authority protocol if you want to. Another thing you can do is to say, well, my document is actually the signed response I got from a different Roughtime server. So you can start chaining those. So you have ask one server, get the next server to sign that reply, get the next server to sign yet another reply. And I'm not going to say in blockchain, but the idea is that you can have a chain of replies, and they should all come in sort of increasing time order. So if you look at the order between the signatures you have, well, they should be in order because otherwise something is broken. And if one server is disagreeing, if the time you see from one server and 10 servers on the other sides of it disagree, you can probably quite certain that this server is actually broken. This server is either compromised or the clock is broken. So this gives you a way of auditing or having accountability for Roughtime servers. So if you want to remove a server from the lists because you say this server is bad, it's giving bad time, well, then you have a cryptographic proof you can hand to the maintainer of the list and say, hey, here, look, I have proof, just take it out, no discussions needed. Next thing I wanted to talk about, wanted to say was the Merkle tree. I promised to say more about it. A Merkle tree is basically a way of saying, well, we're going to hash multiple documents. We get one signature at the top. So with a Merkle tree, you can actually sign requests from multiple clients with one ED25519 operation, because ED25519 is kind of heavyweight. So if you can sign multiple requests with just one signing operation, this will reduce the CPU load on the server. And this is sort of a good thing if you want to scale up to billions of IoT devices talking to you, wanting to use Roughtime. And Roughtime has evolved a bit now. So I'd say it's a pretty decent generic time protocol. It has changed. It has now a lot better accuracy than 10 seconds. So the timestamps are actually down to a microsecond right now. It does have security, which NTP doesn't. It can run on really resource-constrained devices, and NTS sort of has problems with that. And it still solves the original problem it was supposed to solve, which was to solve the bootstrapping problem. And for me, this adds a bit of complexity, and this is a bit of trade-off. So some of this complexity conflicts with the original goals of Roughtime. Since you have microsecond accuracy of the timestamps, well, then you start, when you're doing sub-second accuracy, you need to think about leap seconds. Because if you add or remove a second, well, if you care about fractions of seconds, well, that's quite a lot. If you only care about 10 seconds, you don't need to care because it's within the error margins. Roughtime right now has support for TAI, which is atomic time, which is basically UTC without the leap seconds. Useful for scientists mostly. Roughtime has support for UT1, which is basically solar time, which is useful for astronomy. And none of this is really necessary if you need 10-second timestamps. So do we really need this? Personally, me with my embedded hat on, I like having microsecond accuracy. I don't see the need for TAI or I can't really justify the need for UT1. That feels a bit unnecessary, but that's my opinion, and I don't know. So what do we want to do with Roughtime? Well, Roughtime development right now has stalled. For example, our guy, a guy who's associated with NetNode who has been working on Roughtime, he's busy doing his PhD. So last time I talked to him, he basically said, busy, come back after Christmas. I don't have time right now. The other people have also been kind of busy with other things. Another problem with Roughtime is that it's kind of fragmented. Right now, there is Roughtime draft version 4, 5, 7, and 8, and they all are incompatible. They don't talk to each other. So right now, it's a pain to try to implement Roughtime. So we have gotten funding from RIPE to actually work on Roughtime, try to bang it into shape. And what we want to do going forward is basically get help from you. We need help with sort of requirements. What is actually needed in a protocol like Roughtime? And one of the sort of groups or interest groups we see could be interested in Roughtime are people doing IoT resource-constrained devices. Is Roughtime the draft the way it is written right now? Does it fulfill your requirements? Have we missed something? Could we drop things like UT1? I don't know. And since I'm sort of embedded Linux, not really time devices, I have my opinions, but I might be totally wrong. So we really need input. Our goal or our plan is basically, well, let's write a requirement document, get input from all of you, write a requirement document, take that requirement document, feed it into the draft and try to update the draft so that we actually fulfill the requirements and maybe drop things if people don't need them. After that, of course, work on the implementations, get those into shape so that everybody who's done a Roughtime implementation, get them to support the latest version of the draft, and after that, make it into, get people to implement it, and then, of course, try to submit it to the RFC editors at IETF and make it into proper IETF standard, or standard isn't the right word, but, well, close enough. So here are some resources about this. You can find the latest version of Roughtime draft at IETF. I have a working implementation of Roughtime for version 4, 5, and 7 running on real devices, so we do have working code. I'm going to implement version 8 pretty soon, but it's pretty new, so I haven't had time yet. NetNode, we also run Roughtime servers that we sort of plan to keep running as long as people are interested in Roughtime. Marcus Dansari, that I mentioned, who's actually written the Roughtime implementation we're using on the server side, he runs roughtime.se. There's a mailing list called Proto Roughtime, so if you just Google for that, you'll find it. And Cloudflare, who were driving, they were part of people who actually started out with Roughtime. They have a bunch of blog posts about the background, what the goals were for Roughtime. And of course, finally, it's me, so my mail address. So if you're interested in this, either talk to me here or shoot me a mail, because I really would like to get input so we can get started and kickstart this. So I think that was all for me. And any questions?
So thanks for the talk. So we have one question here from the microphone.
Wolfgang Tremmel, home automation user. I would love to see this on ESP32 and on ESP Home.
ESP32. And the source code is?
Jad Sham from RIPE NCC. I was just wondering, how did you get the accuracy to go down from 10 seconds to microseconds? And is that still work in progress?
It's the resolution of timestamps. So originally, it wasn't designed to have this resolution. I think they just used whole seconds. Now the fields for the timestamps are microseconds. And you're basically, the accuracy up to your network. If you have a sort of round trip time of 100 milliseconds, you probably will not get microsecond accuracy. But if you're using a local network, you have a millisecond ping time average over time, and you believe that your latency going to the device and latency coming back, if it's sort of the same in both ways, well, do a bit of averaging and you can actually get really good accuracy at the end.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Marco Davids, SIDN Labs. Thank you for the presentation. Just a simple question, I suppose.
Yep.
But you said there is a list of Roughtime servers in the software, in the firmware or whatever.
Yep.
Is that based on DNS names or IP addresses? And of course, the reason for asking is you might still have a bootstrapping problem is if a domain name is DNSSEC signed.
Yeah. Good question. I don't know. Right now in my implementation, it's just a string and you do a name lookup. Or you can put in IP. Actually, my C code, I put in IP addresses, but it's actually, it does it in lookup, so it would work with names. I'm not sure. I mean, you could say, well, we'll use plain old DNS without any security to look up the IP addresses. The thing that that makes it secure is that we have the public keys. So somebody who can interfere with DNS, they can always do a denial of service attack, but they can't trick you into getting the wrong time. But if you can do a denial of service attack on NTP or Roughtime, well, you can probably totally disrupt communication anyway. So open question,
yeah.
and I think it's up to the implementer. Do you want to bet that the IP addresses are stable and will still be the same in 10 years, exactly. Or do you bet on the names being stable and DNS still working in 10 years? So I don't know, actually.
Oh, thanks.
Good question. Thanks.
So we have we have 3 questions from the Q&A session. So the first question is from Neil O'Reilly, RIPE Vice Chair. How best to give input to Roughtime requirements? Issues on GitHub or?
I'm not sure. I believe the mailing list may be the best way to start, the proper Roughtime mailing list. There are a couple of different Roughtime projects on GitHub, and there is one which contains the sort of current ecosystem for Roughtime, which is basically a list of existing servers. That might be a good place if we want to start adding issues. But that's some sort of, I'm not sure. Start with a mailing list or mails to me, and we'll see where we end up.
All right. The second question, I mean, I will read the question, and the other comment. I struggle a little bit with figuring out what Karen wanted to say. Anyways, so the question was from Karen O'Donoghue, NTP Working Group Co-Chair, and she was asking, how does this work align with the NTP version 5 work ongoing in the IETF? Is it possible that some of those features could be there? And then she said, and apologies for putting question here, it seems to have been bounced from the remote queue. Good work, Krista. So,
Roughtime is right now a totally separate protocol from NTP. So it's a new protocol. It doesn't have anything to do with NTP at all. As I said before, it might be possible to actually take these concepts from Roughtime, apply it into NTP. So it has trade-offs because NTP has issues, and I think one of the goals with Roughtime was to solve some of the issues with NTP. But you could take the same principles with sort of multiple servers using ED 25519. You could apply it to NTP, and I think it would work perfectly fine, but it won't solve the current issues with NTP. On the other hand, there's NTP version 5 in the works, which people are working on within the NTP working group in IETF. And the same ideas should probably work quite well with NTP version 5. So I'm not sure if the protocol would be Roughtime in the end, right? But right now, Roughtime is what we have. And I think if we can get this, make a requirements document and say, hey, these are the requirements, then we are in much better position to say, we actually need a new protocol, or maybe could do this on NTP instead.
Yeah.
But sort of, I don't want to distract from NTP works, and I'm sort of, we do have Roughtime right now. Let's talk about Roughtime. But
Okay.
It would be fairly easy to make me change my mind.
Yeah. So, and Karen is following up with asking, what I was wondering was, is it possible to improve NTP instead of creating a third time synchronization protocol, including PTP? I think you already answered that,
yeah,
that
question,
question
yes,
right now.
So,
yeah. So I think we covered that as well. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes, hi, Jadil Chan, RIPE NCC again. I might have a question, could be complete rubbish, so sorry in advance. But if I understood well, if we want to use the Roughtime, we should have access to this list of public servers or whatever. Yeah. But is it possible also to replicate this within a private setup? I'm trying to think about these big factories that might be using private LTE to run these IoTs and whatever, without exposing them to public servers.
Definitely. I mean, it's just a public key and hard-coded list of public keys and addresses to the devices. You could use a CAN bus if you want to, or you could use LoRaWAN. I mean, Roughtime is just a packet with timestamps over UDP, over a datagram protocol. You sign the response with a private key, and then you check the response against a hard-coded list of public keys. I mean, you could do this on UDP, you could do this on any datagram protocol, you could even do it over TCP if you want to, and you could, and there's nothing stopping you from saying, I have my own private Roughtime infrastructure. If I'm in a car using CAN bus, I could say that my master control in my car is a Roughtime server, has a private key, and all my devices are configured with a public key for that server. And that's totally separate from everything else. So you can use a protocol like Roughtime any way you want, really.
In that case, we have to work with the manufacturer to get like the list of my private Roughtime server into the...
And then you have the key distribution problem, which is kind of a hard problem to solve, but it's a trade-off. And I think it's actually, I think it's a decent trade-off. But since it's a public key system, a manufacturer could actually publish, say that our controllers from our company, they use this public key. Or they might say every car has a unique public key. And when you configure your device to work in the car, you have to configure the private key for this specific car. And it will work with this specific car, and then it's locked down.
Okay, thank you.
And once again, that's sort of requirements. Please give me input, but this is really good input. Is this a use case which is important? Well, we should put in the requirements document. So thanks.
So I think we can close the Q&A session. So yeah, slightly over time, but I think it was worth it. And just to think about get active in the community, get active in the mailing round, and so hopefully we can have 1 or 2 intermediate sessions to progress on certain things where we have the emerging things on security. We have new standards growing up. We have new ways we want to go, and so I think it's interesting to keep each other aware, not just half a year from time to time. So use it more often, and then this would be the right forum.
Right. Yeah, nothing to add from my side. Something out of scope of this session. I was asked to inform you that the PC elections are open since 4 p.m. You should have received emails with that, so just keep in mind to vote. With that, thanks everybody for the participation. Thanks so much to our speakers. Good discussions today, and hope to see you all on RIPE 88. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. So welcome to this BOF session. ENOG has sunset, CANOG should rise. This was something that I was finishing in the last days as well. I needed some soul searching how to present a topic that can be a bit explosive sometimes, like a powder keg. So I think there's going to be a bit less ENOG and so on, but I think it's gonna work. So I always get nervous at talks like this, so I will start with that. I would like to get reactions here, like it's above, so there's discussion. I have a lot to talk, but like if you react to anything, you don't have to wait in the end. I want to hear the improvement, the disapproval, the gasps, and so on. So wait, this is the laser pointer. How do I get the next slide? It works. So hi, my name is Urban Suhadolnik. I'm master's student at TU Graz, specializing in network cybersecurity and IoT. I've been active here since Belgrade, and sometimes when I travel around, I've started getting questions, and this is an idea, a talk that started on one of those travels. So what I will cover today is the question started when I was traveling in Armenia. I will about internet there. Then I moved that to Central Asia. Where does internet come from? It kind of turns out to be a traded commodity. Something about ENOG, how to build future communities, and how to build them based on my values, and I hope also ripe values. In the end, I have some, it was originally written as proposals, as you still can see here, but it's more as discussion topics. So, some disclaimers for the beginning, because I am talking about some region, I'm speaking for myself. I paid everything to get here by myself, so there's don't blame RIPE. And I will touch about some conflicts potentially in the ENOG region, but I don't want to talk too many about them because they're not the main topic of discussion. Also, some of the data that I'm presenting is a bit old, is the latest I could find, but I hope that this will still be able to shine a light on a underrepresented region in our service region, and it's meant for the European colleagues here mostly as that. And I actually hate when Westerners go and start saying that you guys have problems and you need solutions. So you might start with the first question: do I hate myself? The answer is yes. So to start. So a few years ago, I was traveling in Armenia, and one of those long bus rides, I was on the internet on my phone and started wondering, where does Armenia get its internet from? And Armenia is a country in a bit of unfavorable situation. They have close border with Turkey. In the east they have Azerbaijan. That at that time they were officially at war. Now things have changed a bit, but they're still, the point is they're close. And to the south they border Iran, and to the north they border Georgia, and they're landlocked and they do not have access to the sea. So what does that mean? So for an ISP, an LIR, or whatever, to get a real connection to the internet, they have to peer to one of the tier 1 providers. And for countries outside of Europe, that's usually via underwater sea cables, and Armenia does not have this option. So the question stands, where do they get it? And where do they get communication in general? So Armenia has to rely on one of its neighbors for IP transit of higher capacities. They have to kind of import internet from those neighboring countries, and that can be dependent on good relations with said countries. And that's for something that is like really for something as crucial as internet that we use every day, that some of us consider as a human right and can mean between like knowing what's happening with your family abroad or something or not. So in practice, Armenia has, although this map disagrees with me a bit, they mostly peer through Georgia. They actually, there they go, at least from the trace routes I was doing at the time, they figure out that they mostly go through peer with Russian providers. And in Georgia, but they could also connect to the Caucasus on lines under sea cable towards Bulgaria, where they can connect to Europe and the Tier 1 providers there. So, so obviously, this is an extremely vulnerable situation. What if there would be some conflict between Armenia and Georgia, and what would happen in that case? So, or like some sanctions for some reason. And, you know, again, we're talking about internet, which we know what it means here for us. So if you're in that situation, you need to prepare for headlines like this. Because there is one line between Armenia and Georgia that goes next to the railway, it can be cut, and it has was cut by a lady looking for copper. So you have to get ready for something like that. So although it was unintentional, this has actually happened before. As you know, there can be some alternatives that are none in the low latency or high capacity. So the spectrum, you can make like a satellite connection or something like that. I think that they also have some microwave links to Russia into the stations in the Caucasus, which have their own inherent capacity limitations, and neither provide enough capacity or to support, let's say, a serious IT sector or needs of the general population, if that would be cut. So the question is, so internet needs to come from, for small countries, that they don't produce and host their own content in their own language. This has to come from somewhere else. And they have to peer with IXPs and CDNs in neighboring countries. And for example, I'm from Slovenia. We consume in Slovenia mostly English content, which almost no is hosted in Slovenia. And so if we need to, and the content providers are not peering at the Slovenian Internet Exchange. So for example, we get our Netflix from Vienna or Milano sometimes. And also for an interesting fact, when you come to like to the Balkans region, where Slovenia is, like not even the countries between themselves like are not interconnected in very weird ways. For example, if I go from my home network, from my home ISP provider towards let's say Croatian one, it actually goes through the Vienna Internet Exchange. So this says something how things are done. And I like to joke that there are no data centers south of Frankfurt. This map also obviously disagrees with me, but like for me, Frankfurt is north, and Switzerland and Milano are not. But basically, southeast of Frankfurt, there is no data center, so that kind of supports this thing. That they actually internet content, those bits originate for certain countries somewhere else and need to be kinda imported. So I would like to show you this map. Do you know what this map represents? Anyone, please? I would like to have some reactions. Does anyone know? It's not internet. No. No. Gas lines. It's gas pipelines in Europe. And it's interesting that like it shows that it's actually very similar to this map that maybe some of you know from the ITU or fiber links. They're actually really similar. And basically, internet in a sense is piped the same way that something like a gas is. It has sources, it has different sources in Europe where the gas comes from and the internet comes from. but the basic infrastructure is similar. And there's a very interesting, there's an interesting parallel. Countries that have access to international waters have cheaper IP transit, because like it doesn't feel intuitive at the beginning, but if you have access to international waters, you can throw a cable into the water, take it to wherever you want, and peer with that country, or peer with an independent tier 1 providers using sea cables, while that is not possible for countries that is not. And it's the same for gas. Yes, you can have a direct pipeline from somewhere that produces a lot of gas, or you can have a port that brings to you. But potentially just having this alternative can bring lower cost alternatives to the table. So, this is interesting when I talk about this to Armenia, and the question is, and Armenia is not that bad when it comes to internet. It has some bad data points, but it's not that bad. Does this apply to any other countries in a much more worse or much more complex way? And that would be Central Asia. So countries in Central Asia are all landlocked. They are in very similar situation or basically worse, and they depend on their neighbors to import the internet, which in turn depend on some other countries in the first place to get their internet from them. So, for example, we see that Kazakhstan, we can see that Kazakhstan is in good relations with Russia, gets like, this is a bit older data from 2014. I could not get newer data. Maybe somebody can stand up and say there are newer data points, but the basic premise stands. So they're good terms, they have it. We see in Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, there is no problem, while in other countries, we see that there is, the uplinks are basically concerning for 2014. Yes? Oh no, it has 650 megabits per second. Yeah. So we have, okay, I expected this right meeting to have a bit better internet connection, but when I was planning, let's say some events actually do have higher internet links than these countries, which, as I said before, in turn need to import from Kazakhstan. You have to be on good terms with all of them. So we can basically talk about internet poverty, and this goes to some other data points that are concerning. If we look at internet penetration in this country, so for Kazakhstan with the highest uplink speed, I would say one that is not limiting, they have a 75.9% internet penetration, which I'm from Slovenia, so I compare that to my own country. We have 79% internet penetration. This is information from 2021. Which is basically on par, no problems. While we look at Uzbekistan, which has 50%, which is much, forgot to mention before. Already in the report from before that I was quoting, they were writing that they were projects at that moment to increase the international uplinks, but it's still, we can see in the data points that they're, yep. Yes. Yep. The internet penetration? Yep. What is the current data?
Hello everyone, Aziz, sorry. Aziz Akhunjana from Uzbekistan. So we have one national operator, and we can purchase internet connection only from them as private companies. So they were giving numbers around 87 to 91. I can share. Yeah, I can share the data. I have it.
Can I come later to you?
Sure.
Because I'm very interested in this.
Let's exchange because this data is very old. It's really old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wikipedia quotes
changes in the country.
I know I'm quoting Wikipedia. Wikipedia says from 2021, but I want to get better information.
And the connection speed also, it's much more.
Much better, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So while with other countries, we see that the situation is much more concerning. I hope there is newer data available, and these are quoting the wrong sources. But I still find it concerning. So, and if we compare that to other countries, let's say on the left, we have Europe. We have, I put in Italy, the best countries, the worst countries. I do see that the internet penetration for countries other than Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are troubling, even compared to other countries in the general region. And if we look at the global map, we can see that there are two more problematic areas, but even with but in our service region is Central Asia with that old data. But even other parts, let's say, of the developing world, if you look South America, have much better numbers. So I think this is like, because this is in ripe service region, I think it should be like, I think it's a region of concern, and I think it should be on our agenda more times, what's happening there. And RIPE is already doing some things there. Since I'm showing you this data, I want to share something interesting that I found during the data. How did I get the statistics? I have no idea, because nobody can beat Monaco in the internet penetration. So we can look at so what are the solution? Yes, there's infrastructure. We can't do much about that. I've looked into it. We can look at the community thing. We can look at two maps. I won't speculate too much because I'll make mistakes. But yes, there are links can be done. You can see that Iran, south of it, is very well connected, has good infrastructure. China, I think, is just generally believed it has very good connections. But I want to, it's not the topic for today. But the Caspian Sea, there were some ideas, but it's mostly impossible because there are no cable laying ships there, but could be solved. So, and I think that, like if some alternatives are built, I think that if they would be built there, that could provide long-term like stability, low prices, and so on. But I think that, in Europe, we have learned what like dependency on resources on something like a key commodity can mean. And before I made a parallel with gas, we have painfully learned that if you're dependent on someone, that can potentially even be a contributing factor for some conflicts. And I think this is bad. So what I think that we should talk more at RIPE meetings is a community for Central Asia that would promote interregional connectivity, IXP, so on. And I think that CAPIF here is a very good first step. But just a second. But for and it's a very good first step for improving the connectivity there and the general community level. And I think we can bring a lot of experience from Europe because we are not as similar. We have landlocked countries and we are extremely interconnected. And maybe those things can be brought. Some statistics from RIPE Labs show that peering between certain countries in Central Asia goes very often through Russia or even through Frankfurt, which shows that there maybe should be more done on IXPs on the local level. And before I manage something about infrastructure, like if you're on bad terms with your neighbor, you don't have to go like, we're going to close the tap. Internet is increasing, what, 15%, 20% year over year. So there's just like no capacities for later, and that I think can be problematic. So, and those infrastructure part are out of our scope. They're going to be made at some point with little motivation. But yeah, internally is an internal platform for cooperation. And what I think that CAPIF is not enough is I think we really need to focus to bring in people from that region here as to become active participants of RIPE community and see them on RIPE meetings like this one. And I think there's one question why those people like, what is missing? Is missing trust? that it actually means something to come here? Is it missing the need to improve stuff? You're looking at me smiling all the time. Like, what's the question? Why don't we have more people? Because if we look at the statistics, how many people came here? There's 2 more people of you. They never came, even worse. And we have people from Armenia and Georgia, which I will talk about later, but for other countries. So we have 1 person from that region, that's you. 100% opinion of the region. And I think that's a problem. And CAPIF, while is, I think, a great starting project, in RIPE we have we have RIPE regional meetings, which we have inconsistent naming scheme. We have ENOG, ENOG, and SCE. Hisham does not agree. Which are called NOGs, which are RIPE regional meetings. We have SCE, which is a regional meeting that has the same rights as the other one, and NOG is usually just something at a country that RIPE supports with a small contribution, but should be supported by independently. Like, I think that CIP has a problem that is actually not a full RIPE regional meeting because it does not have its own representatives. For ENOG, we gave them PC members. For SE, we have a PC member. For MEDOC, we have them as well, but we don't have all the representatives. So I think the next step is to expand on that, give them obligations striving towards having a full regional meeting in the Central Asian region, with those rights that are similar to ENOG, MEDOC, and SE. And maybe, right now we can think with the sunsetting of ENOG, I think there's opportunity to give this region a voice with a PC member and other representatives that they should have. I'm not sure if there are any others, but I think we should have them. Because ENOG's PC member term is running out and we should think where to pass it on. So, we in the past have been building communities. I don't think they all last for, like, one has just sunset. And I was thinking, what are the good cornerstones to build a community that is going to last? So I think there are common problems, willingness to work together. Not all countries can work together. Ability, like people can want to work together, and that is geographical proximity, visa policy, language, sometimes. A manageable travel. I think in SCE, we have a very, it's a small region which is easy to travel either by car or anything. And I think in some other regions, for example, I know that ENOG was just simply probably not, like, they had meetings, half of the meetings were outside of Russia, but Russia was the biggest and the most active community. Of course, half of the meetings were there. Like, it could not end in any other way. And if you look at this map here, there's a problem with this map. Did anyone, and Ukraine and Baltics, please don't spoil this. Did anyone notice what's wrong with this map? Please, someone. No. Sasha knows. What's wrong with this map? This is not map of ENOG. And, this could not, we took USSR, put it in one region, and a lot of things that are in the CIS region have their meetings in simply in Moscow. And I think that's only logical if you take a region like this, if you make a region like this, meetings are going to be in Russian. There's going to be very far from certain other parts. Oh my God, I got photos. So I don't think it could end in any other way. And the ex-USSR NOG, did have some commonality in language, partly, favor visa policy, not anymore, but they also had, as I said before, huge asymmetry and dependency. And I've already mentioned these things, so I don't really believe that having such a vast region that is bigger than certain RIRs is a good basis. So I think for the next community, that we build, that we strive on, something to replace the representatives in that region, we will need to do better. I have, this was at the beginning proposals, but I wanted to be more as discussion points. We are at the above. Nonetheless, I would start with something with mentioning with this. RIPE NCC as an organization, I think it's very unique. Certain organizations that are on this level are usually more part of like something like UN. I think we are lucky and effective stewards of internet numbers, and our legitimacy, I think, comes from doing a good work. But compared to many other organizations that are not exactly UN, but on a, let's say, on the European or EU level, like CEPT or EBU, I don't think that membership, well, the membership in RIPE service region is not exactly optional. You know, you just have to be there. And this RIPE NCC has to work with all members was actually, I was told by a few people here, I was remembered. So some of the of the discussion topics also go here towards Russia, even if a lot of people here were avoid talking about it for a long time. And I still believe that the values here that I think I share with RIPE, is we all believe in open internet, freedom of speech, that internet should be for everyone. And I have heard some proposals here that have saddened me about weaponizing, about removing this right to certain people, and I think this is wrong. And if we do something like that, I think we might even lose RIPE. We are doing really well. We are a very strong organization, but that's okay. So I will touch upon countries in ENOG and what I think could be done, and also connected to Central Asia. So Ukrainians might disagree with me. I hope not. I hope I did figure out well. With sunsetting of ENOG, I don't think that Ukraine was sharing that many problems with ENOG countries by itself. And right now, they're mostly looking towards Europe, also peering, and work in the old ENOG region I don't think is realistic anymore. So I think we should more just interact them here on the European level. On the CATIF, I think it should be converted into a full regional meeting. CANOG, but we don't have a good, NOG can meet something else at the same time. I believe that this could have Central Asian countries, but also I think they're the gateway countries for this for this region are also, for example, Iran, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. So I think they could be there, and Armenia is just there. And I think another thing that supports maybe this kind of organization is that visa policies, including, for example, for Iran that I mentioned, I think are extremely favorable there, like also with the proximity and ease of, I hope, ease of travel, are very favorable. This is a matrix of visa. Green is visa-free, red is visa, blue is e-visa, which is complex, and this is not possible at all. I mentioned Iran before. I have heard, I will not assume everything here, but that that Iran had some problems with getting visas for ENOG, and perhaps they could work better with Central Asia because they share language with certain countries and can be a transit providers towards the Gulf region, where there's a lot of internet exchanges and a lot of transit providers. But we can also, maybe they can work with both. I don't know how the situation is improving or not improving right now. So with Russia, I think that ENOG has sunset. I think it would be overpowering the way it was before. I think that if we want to build a community in Central Asia, the meetings should be there, but maybe they could be observers and be there, have their meetings there. But I think that the way it was right now, when all the meetings were moved to Moscow, it would pull away air from other communities elsewhere. And for Russia to work with them is maybe better to just interact directly with European communities because they're the only of the same size that can handle this, so to avoid asymmetry. And some things are also go towards a RIPE NCC. So as I said before, to work directly with Russia. Would we have RIPE meetings in Russia? I don't think so, because the active RIPE community, the people that come here, would not like to go there. But maybe RIPE NCC days or something, like RIPE NCC has to work with them. RIPE community, I don't know, we'll see. But I think also in general, to be more welcoming to other regions, we should think about having RIPE meetings outside of EU. And personally, for me, as if I look at the meetings, my favorite meeting was, well, of course, my first one in Belgrade. It was the most accessible by cost for me to go there. And I think it's also the most accessible when it came to all the visa policies to bring. I think we had some people that are not able to come now to EU, and I think it's a very bad trend that we have 3 RIPE meetings in a row in the EU. So maybe we should have taken, I don't know, potentially every second RIPE meeting in the EU. And since I'm answering Central Asia, maybe we can meet them halfway, or even the Middle East, by having a meeting, let's say in Georgia or in Turkey. I think that could be beneficial. So thank you for listening. And since it's above some discussion on this is supposed to start a discussion, and I hope we talk about this and maybe improve the situation in the whole of RIPE service region. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Doris Hauser from Niketi, but I'm speaking for myself in this case. So I agree with you on a lot of topics, and I think that those countries should be more integrated into such meetings on all, even like for all different kinds of regions. But I would like to start a discussion about every second RIPE meeting being somewhere in Central Asia, because since you mentioned the Serbian RIPE meeting, there were some other problems that came with this. Yes, it was cheaper to get there for a lot of people, and maybe also for the visa easier for some people to get there. But then again, it was less inclusive for people with different kinds of genders, since Serbia isn't very open about this topic. Mm-hmm. And also for different kinds of diets. So Serbia is very much a country that eats a lot of meat, and it's hard, for example, for vegetarians to get along there. So yeah, you have to account for a lot of different things in choosing where the RIPE meeting is.
Okay. Okay, I would like to respond. I think we have a very diverse, the active RIPE community is very diverse, very open on a lot of things. And I think that's definitely a question, how to make the community that we already have to feel open and safe, you know, like I know that a lot of people did not want to go to Serbia because they didn't feel safe. I hope that the dietary things can be solved with better event management. But I think we also measure our diversity and inclusivity in having as many members from different regions and backgrounds. But that's a very valid point.
Jim Reed, just a random member of the internet. I think the points the previous speaker made are perfectly valid and need to be taken into consideration. Seeing that we can just have another meeting, say, somewhere in Central Europe every so often, it's an easy thing to say, but it's very difficult to achieve in practice. There's also some other complicated factors involved in that. For example, is there a major airport nearby? How easy is it to get there from other parts of the world, not just within the RIPE service region? Then we also have to consider language issues. You know, for example, if we were to go, say, somewhere in the Middle East, we probably have to have some kind of capacity for Arabic because of the cultural divides there, or the cultural issues there. And we also have to look at things like venues. Do we have somewhere that's got big enough meeting space, enough hotel rooms, and so on? What's the connectivity going to be like? What's it going to cost? And all these other factors have to be taken into consideration as well. So it's very difficult to come up with a suitable balance that's going to satisfy everybody. And yes, I fully support the idea in principle of going to some of the more out of the way parts of the service region, if I can use such a glib expression for that. But we have to factor in all these other considerations as well. It's not as simple as saying, well, we need to go to the Central Asian region because we haven't been there before. There's a lot more to it than that. And in some ways, some of those issues with the Central European issues were done through ENOG in the past, and also with the things that were done with MENOG in the Middle East. So if those particular fora were not achieving the goals for some definition of what those goals were, by all means, let's have a discussion about how to try and improve these things. But simply just saying we should have a right meeting in the Central European region every 2 or 3 years is, quite frankly, not a sustainable argument. We need to have something better than that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would just I hope I didn't say that every second one should be in Central Asia. I think I said everyone is not in EU. No, just because it was mentioned twice, I hope I did not say something wrong.
Well, just to be clear, it's not a case of just saying it's like we have to have one meeting per N years in some other part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an unreasonable stance to take. I think we should say is we should try to be as open and accommodating as possible and try to address all areas of the service region, but not have it done on a strict schedule where we have to go to such and such a location or such and such a part of the region every 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, whatever. I don't think we should have that kind of restrictive regime.
Mm-hmm.
Jan George, 66 Connect. Thank you for this. Yeah, regarding the RIPE meetings, after the COVID, we have been traveling up and down. Went Berlin, Rotterdam, Serbia, then up. We should start traveling left and right. I agree with that. But my point is, with converting the CAPIF to CANOG, CAPIF is a peering forum.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different from a NOG. And both of them are needed in the region. So currently, because there is no NOG, like a general big NOG in the region, CAPIF is carrying some components of the NOG. And I don't think that converting CAPIF to CANOG is a really good idea. CAPIF needs to stay and needs to become a purely peering forum for the region. And CANOG could take these bits and pieces of a NOG from CAPIF and become sort of like a regional NOG. Now, a different discussion is, should this be a RIPE regional meeting or should this be a regional meeting of outside RIPE and NCC? This is now a different discussion because we voted for 50% less for the budget of RIPE NCC in Rotterdam, and that was not a really great idea, if you ask me, right? You will come to the mic. So adding another regional meeting to the RIPE NCC, I don't know. There is other people in the room that can talk about this, but I think that if the region wants to develop, they need both. Thank you.
Short response. What Jan said, I think it's extremely valid. One thing that I accidentally left out, I think for the regional meetings, we've got to a model when we had ENOG and MENOG that worked as some sort of as an interface to regions that don't even come here. And I think that's very important for our interactions with those regions where basically nobody comes here, like very little people. Well, I think it's interesting how SCE works, which I think it's another layer of interacting with the region that people can go, but maybe go in a bit smaller numbers. And I think that those that are like an interface with the RIPE community are very important. But this is not against or anything. But yeah, sorry.
I'm Sergey, a member of many ENOGs. I think that organizing an international ENOG maybe not the best idea, because as were presented during our gathering of ENOG organizers meetings, almost I think 10 recent RIPE meetings. By the way, it will be tomorrow about noon. Starting the new ENOG from the scratch is easy. The meetings can be organized on demand or on special occasions with limited conditions, without any 5-star hotel and so on. So it could be a bar or university auditorium, whatever. And organizing an international ENOG for many countries is really a problem. Requiring organization and logistics and many other things. So probably supporting and committing to a local NOCs will make better effort.
Thank you for the comment.
So Hans-Petter Holen, Managing Director of the RIPE NCC. Thank you for doing this BOF and starting this discussion. I think this is much appreciated. I will look back a bit. When I joined the RIPE community, it was 3 RIPE meetings a year. And it was a struggle for me as a network engineer to find time and budgets to go to all 3 meetings. So I was quite happy when the RIPE NCC decided to do, or the RIPE chair / RIPE NCC decided to do only 2 meetings a year. But then we added ENOG, SCE, and MINOG. So we actually went from 2 meetings to 5 meetings a year. So for me, yes, the RIPE meetings are special. They're a full week meeting. It's a PC. They're quite grown up. But all of these meetings for me is about bringing people together. So the KPIF meetings, whether it's peering forum or NOG or whatever, I'm not really too hung up on that. It's really about bringing people in those countries together. As you said, there are challenges there. It was really cool in Uzbekistan to see heads of 3 telcos in 3 neighboring countries on stage talking about similar problems. And my colleague here, Hisham, challenging them on, you need to figure out how to do local peering, right? So I think rather than me talking more about the strategy in the area, maybe I'll challenge Hisham to come up here and talk a bit about that, because I think a lot of what you're suggesting, we're thinking about. But how to do this on the community area, I think really needs to come bottom up from those communities. And I think Sergey here has valuable experience on how to organize multinational NOGs or not. And yeah, maybe that's not the most important thing. Maybe it's the bringing people together. That's the important bit here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Hisham. You're hiding over there for a very long time. But since you didn't come here, then I didn't do something very bad. Then you would be the first one to the microphone.
I actually was waiting for Aziz to come up. Then I can talk after Aziz. Okay. Hisham Ibrahim, RIPE NCC. Thank you for organizing this. I wish you had done this 5 years ago. You would have made my life so much easier. The line of thought is there. We want to be able to help communities develop, and part of that is the reason why we organize these meetings is to build these communities, right? They come, they meet, they discuss, they get good ideas, and they go off and they figure out how to do this. We support them with training, we do what we can, and so the notion is there. There's a few things that you mentioned, but I'm trying to figure out what to start with first. You mentioned about the RIPE meetings, and I think a few people already mentioned this. The majority, the core, I don't even know where to start. Aziz is the only person from Central Asia that has come to this event, right? And that speaks to, the statistics speaks to barriers that they have to overcome, including visas, as you said, including costs, which is something that we factor in when we look into where we're organizing the RIPE meetings. However, the RIPE meetings cannot just be, because it's the bigger vehicle, it cannot be the one that moves around as easily for the reasons that were mentioned. I won't mention those. But that's why we have the regional meetings, right? We go into ENOG, we're closer to members, we meet there where they are and try to develop on that side. So we do national engagements, that funnels up into a regional level, and hopefully that comes here. I'm very happy to see, well, at least from the Middle East, a lot more people coming into the meeting this year. That was very nice for me to see. Hopefully, with us engaging more in Central Asia, we see more of that happening. Also factoring in the cost is still there, the visa issues are still there. So the RIPE meetings will probably mostly stay within Europe. That's part of the strategy, honestly, to be clear. And Jan was talking about how it goes. The idea is maybe doing northwestern countries in spring when the weather is nicer there, and then doing southern and eastern countries in the fall meetings where the weather is nicer in that part of the world. That's an oversimplification, but the idea is to be able to go all over Europe, including countries that are not EU as well. So Serbia would be one of them. We're looking into one of the prospective hosts that applied for the RIPE meetings is Albania. So looking into how can we get closer to these things while we have the regional meetings that serve the regional stuff. You mentioned something about the PC having a chair. CAPIF doesn't have, it has a PC group, but it's not formalized in that sense yet. Right, and I don't know if Miriam wants to talk about the regional chairs at the PC or not. That's something I'll leave up to her. But just having a chair on the PC is not going to bring in more people, right? It's actually doing these kind of engagements that would, CAPIF and the others. Actually, I'm the only one. I named CAPIF, and I'm the only one that calls it CAPIF. Everybody else calls it CAPIF, which bothers me. But yeah. CAPIF.
You have to say thank you to Gargano.
Everybody calls it CAPIF. It's the reason why we didn't do it as an ENOG is we try to understand what the need is. And the reason why CAPIF was created the way that it was is they were highly dependent, those countries were highly dependent on Russia for their internet. With the war and with the sanctions and with some of the Russian providers at the time being de-peered, there was that kind of put a little bit more of an urgency for them to start looking into how to interconnect. If you look at their landlocked countries, if you look at their neighbors, there's Russia, I mentioned, China with their Garden Wall, Afghanistan, Iran, all countries that have issues in themselves. So it's not like you can depend on them to be able to connect to the internet, which is why they need to depend on themselves, which is what Hans-Peter talked about, which is when we bring in the operators and we talk about them building into each other's countries and networks to be able to do this. Sorry, I feel I'm giving a presentation here, but like I said, there's so many different points to this. The point being, not everybody likes to talk about plumbing. We're internet plumbers, we love talking about BGP, but to bring in the interests, you need to be talking about the stuff that they're interested in. Peering and interconnection was that, which is why we decided to build this as a peering and interconnection forum and not as an ENOG. There are elements, as Jan said, NOG-ish. If the community, who unfortunately is not in the room, which is a big disadvantage in this discussion, want to form an ENOG, RIPE NCC will absolutely support them. We will sponsor them, we'll send speakers there to their event, because that's what we do. We support NOGs all over our service region. But that's something that needs to be a little bit more grassroots rather than us mandating it to them. We don't divide the service region. We don't go, okay, Iran, you're in the Middle East, so you have to go to ENOG. We actually don't do this. We focus on a few countries in that part of the world, but actually, and I don't remember the statistics, the last CAPIF meeting had people from 18 countries. The Central Asian countries are like 6, 7. So it's really where you find yourself identifying with the community, where you see commonalities, and where it's easy for you to get a visa, where it's cheap for you to travel. And we try to build as much of these platforms as we can with the budget concerns that you heard, to be able to allow people to come and interconnect. So I do think there's something to be said about building a ENOG in Central Asia. That discussion needs to be had with the Central Asians in Central Asia. That's my 2 cents. I'm sorry for giving a long speech.
No, I think it was great, Hisham, everything that you said. Actually, when I was preparing this here, I was actually had to prepare this in a fairly short notice or finish it. I was talking to a lot of people and I heard that actually there has been a lot of activities from RIPE NCC in the Central Asian region, that you even been to a certain country twice in 1 year and so on. So I think this is, I think there is, well, you know this, but I can tell to others. Somebody has sent my draft to Hisham and said, oh, and I got a response back. Yeah, that's actually the same reasons when I search CAPIF. I think there's also like, but I think there's a lot about also about awareness. We do talk, and Jan mentioned it, that there are budget concerns. Everybody mentioned here actually there are budget concerns, and I think that, you know, I wouldn't want that this groundwork that is being done right now, that it stops. I think it should continue. So I hope that there's a discussion helps you keeping all the activities alive there, and I hope they give dividends soon in active participation at the RIPE meetings. So, but I think you understand this region better when you're there, and I think here we should be aware that that's something that we should support in some way, if that's financial, that we know, because if there are budget concerns, the first thing will be cut are those that we do not see. About the RIPE meetings location, I wanted to wait so I don't respond to everyone there. I will say that like non-EU and accessible for the active community is there's not a lot of countries to choose, but it's still not zero. And I think that especially like with the venue like this one here, we see, or for example Rotterdam, that we choose venues that or like locations that are costly for participants. I pay for this out of my own pocket, and that's hard. And I think there's also, we see how many fellowship requests are there for different. I think for Belgrade, they could approve almost all of them or something. For here, they told me, yeah, we couldn't accept you. There's like, I don't know, like multiple tens of requests. So I think that speaks on the accessibility of a certain RIPE meeting. But you know, but since we are like the fact is that we do have costly meetings, I don't think that most people would be financially find it problematic if it would be, for example, in Istanbul, because the flights are paid and apparently nobody cares. If nobody cares that we are here, then nobody cares if it's there. Sorry for putting it that way. So I think this is possible to travel, but I do agree that like the list of countries and locations where this is possible is fairly low. Another thing that I was thinking is a bit else, like we have the regional meetings, which are once a year, and this is twice a year. Maybe even if we move somewhere that where certain part of the community cannot come, that there's, I don't know, and there's a meeting in the EU or somewhere which is like certain countries really hard to get a Schengen visa for. That there's like in the similar time frame that there's like, let's say, okay, we don't have ENOG anymore, but there's the regional meeting in that region, and then when it turns around on the other half of the year, it's where they can go. So everybody can go to two meetings, for example. But now I'm getting long and non-coherent, and I shouldn't let Miriam wait.
Hi, I was just checking if there's a queue behind me, but I'm Miriam Kühne. I am the RIPE chair. I just adding a few things. People have already said most of it. Just one thing that occurred to me. You mentioned fellowships. Actually, yesterday somebody made an interesting comment to me and said he thinks it's good to have lower registration fees for everyone rather than providing fellowships, because it can also be embarrassing to ask for fellowships. I thought that was an interesting comment. So it's almost like you're second class because you can't afford to feed the meeting. So he was more advocating for keeping it kind of accessible for everybody. Just to kind of counter what you just said. I wanted to mention, I think it was good what people said also about the development of local NOGs. I think that's a wonderful development. We see that over the last decades. You know, we started from RIPE and then into the regionals and then to the local communities, which is, I think, a really healthy development. And another comment, I think you were asking about the PC and the representation there. I mean, I think you know that we have representations from the regional events like SEE and ENOG on the RIPE PC, and we leave it to the local communities to decide how they want to have representation on the PC. And we're also working on more inclusion and more involvement from these regional meetings into the RIPE community. I wanted to mention one other thing that has not been mentioned yet, was that we have local hubs this time for the RIPE meeting for the first time, where countries, where people in certain countries, they might have difficulties to travel to the RIPE meeting, get together in their country and participate together, kind of in their hometown or in their country, and participate in the RIPE meeting. I know it's not the same as being at the meeting, but we make that possible. The RIPE NCC provides a lot of support also for that, and we have good remote participation facilities these days. So I hope that will also encourage more participation from countries that traditionally have difficulties maybe to come to our meetings. So I think that's a good development. And talking about online participation, I wanted to ask you, or maybe the team there, if you have actually considered if there are people online that might have a question or a comment to this discussion. Thank you.
The technical team, do we have people online? Thank you for reminding that there's also people online. That's a failure on my side.
I've got the first Q&A is related to, so Xavier Lebris from the RIPE NCC. I'm just going to read the question from Dimitri. Just give me 1 second. So Dimitri Serbulov from ENT, what's wrong with the Russia providing its infrastructure to other countries?
Okay, yeah, I will. I can easily answer that question. Okay, this goes just a bit geopolitical. I think that certain countries, especially around Central Asia, do have interest to influence others, and I think the real but that's the reality of how it is. It's where you are, it's how things are. But I think that looking at alternatives, even if they are not used, can be extremely beneficial, because if Russia has demands for you, yeah, we will not increase your transit when your just natural growth comes after you. You can go, okay, we'll go to China. And yes, China can be like, yeah, but we have our own interest in, say, we go to Iran. And then, and I don't think there will be a time where all three of those will be like, no, like now we will block you. So I just think that it's there. At some point, I've also mentioned this parallel with gas. As I said, when you are dependent on somebody, then that person can know that there is, well, can you step away from that? And with the current developments, I think that we can see that that was extremely painful. And I do believe that certain people thought to be impossible. So I just think that in case there's alternatives, there's less chances for that happening. And since I went to gas, and that I think that, for example, if there would just be a standby infrastructure as an alternative, that could make the situation easier. It's not a problem to get IP transit or in this parallel gas from somebody from a major provider. I think that's completely fine, but I think it's great to have possible alternatives, so they cannot say, well, if you don't like it, you can just, I don't know, go in financial ruin, economical or whatever. So I just believe that alternatives are very good. That will be from this side. I'm Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm one of the founders of RIPE, and I'm on the NCC staff. Thank you for organizing this. I think what I take away from it is that we, as the community and as the RIPE NCC, should not forget the periphery and the to somehow disadvantaged. But I would and you did a good job in reminding us of this. And I think that's important. I also think that if people in the periphery of the RIPE region want to organize themselves, it should be bottom up. They should organize themselves, and we should support them. And we being RIPE, both RIPE and the RIPE NCC, so there should be resources to actually help them do this. I think all the mechanics about where we hold RIPE meetings and things like that are sort of secondary to that. So I'm a bit worried that we might forget these regions. So I think everybody in the RIPE community should take some effort if they have connections or if they have possibilities to actually help there. And also the RIPE NCC as an organization should. Don't get hung up on PC slots and all those mechanics. I think it's bottom up with good support from the rest of us is the way to go. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you for those words. I think that I think I've achieved my main goal. I would comment something about bottom up. Before you told me how RIPE was made, and an incredible story how bottom up can make an extremely good, healthy, and long-lasting organization. I am worried, what if the problem is trust and they would not start organizing by themselves? I hope they can, I hope they will, and that's how we support it, but I don't know where I'm going with this. Yeah.
You said it yourself in a private discussion. You build trust by getting people into one room and know each other and relate to each other. And I think that's what we should support.
And thank you. Yep. Yeah.
Hisham Ibrahim again, very quickly from my side. I'd invite you to do this at CAPIF next year. We're going to Bishkek and have the discussion with them and understand with them what keeps them from organizing something like this. I think you're going to get a lot of very valuable insight and feedback from them. Thanks.
Can you say again? Very bad?
Very valuable insight and feedback
yeah.
from them.
Jan is telling me I have to go. I would love to go to CAP if I would need fellowship. Anyone else? Anyone on the internet?
Yeah, there's one comment from Vesna Marjovic and from the RIPE NCC. Basically, we're introducing local hubs to cover more location. And the question is, does the community support more resources for local hubs so that the meeting become more decentralized and federated?
I don't think I can answer this, but if somebody wants to step up.
Well, Hans-Petter again. If any of you here have votes in the general meeting, come to the general meeting in May when we vote on the charging scheme for 2025. Because if you want to put more resources into our regional engagement, we are more than happy to receive more funding to do so. As was mentioned here, we have to do a cut for next year's budget of 5%. I think it's painful. It's not dramatic, but we need to figure out how to fund what we're doing further on, RIPE NCC is much more than a registry. We're also the secretariat for the community, the network coordination center, and the outreach work is a really important part of what we're doing. So anybody with votes at the GM, think about that when you come to the votes in May, and socialize with your friends and colleagues before that to support more resources into this. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're out of time. Thank you everyone for coming here. I hope that we already mentioned everything, but there is a bit more of awareness of our whole service region, and that you were happy with this buff. Thank you very much.